Domino's believes a free pizza can make just about anything better. That's why when you order online, they'll give you a delicious free Domino's emergency pizza to use in the future. Like when you're stuck late at the office, traffic was brutal, and someone ate your leftovers. When you can't catch a break, get your free Domino's emergency pizza. Domino's Rewards members can earn a free medium 2-topping pizza for use on a future order. Exclusions apply. For complete details, including how to claim and redeem this offer, visit dominos.com/emergency-pizza.
I won't let my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis symptoms define me.
Emerge as you. In 2 clinical studies, Tremfya taken by injection, provided 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks in 7 out of 10 adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. In a study, nearly 7 out of 10 patients with 90% clearer skin at 16 weeks were still clear at 5 years. At 1 year and thereafter, patients and healthcare providers knew that Tremfya was being used. This may have increased results. Results may vary.
Serious allergic reactions may occur. Tremfya may increase your risk of infections and lower your ability to fight them. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms of infection, including fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough. Tell your doctor if you had a vaccine or plan to.
Emerge as you. Learn more about Tremfya, including important safety information at tremfya.com or call 1-877-578-3527. See our ad in Food and Wine magazine. For patients prescribed Tremfya, cost support may be available.
At T. Rowe Price, our curiosity lights the way to help you plan ahead for what matters to you most. Work directly with us, and together, we can help uncover the right investments for you at every stage of your life, whatever your goals. That's the power of curiosity. Better questions, better outcomes. T. Rowe Price. Invest with confidence. Visit troweprice.com/investdirect to learn more.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley's small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix-and-match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello Ranks Squad and welcome to Ranks FC. We are back as a transatlantic football podcast, but maybe not the bit of the Atlantic that you were thinking of. My name is Jack Collins and I'll be your host today, live from Vigo in Galicia and all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. I'm basically looking at him as I stare out across the bay here, Mr. Dean Jones from San Diego. How you doing, mate?
How weird for you. Yeah, you're in a very different setting today as I look at you on my little screen here. Looks very quaint, actually, mate. It looks very quaint. But yeah, San Diego is San Diego, so I've got the sun beaming in through the windows here, mate. It's another lovely day. Went out to a sports bar last night with a few of the dads
Nice.
from the school. So it was an NFL night. So yeah, a bit of Monday night football, a few beers, few chicken wings. Try to embrace the culture as much as possible over here, mate. Bit different from the culture probably to where you are.
Yeah, it's been wonderful, this little trip of mine through Galicia. I'm heading off to Porto tomorrow. So we've basically covered this bit of the peninsula, did A Coruña, where I went to a Deportivo game. We'll talk about that in a minute. Went through Santiago de Compostela, where there's a famous cathedral, a lot of people walking on the Camino. Came down to Vigo for a couple of days and then onwards to Porto, where I'm going to be watching Boavista next weekend. So I'm very excited. A couple of great games, including some more niche teams. But hey, what's new with me? But let's kick things off. I did this with Doogie last week, and it was nice to get this back into the rotation with some things we love, I reckon.
Yeah, well done, Doogie, for stepping in for me so well last week. You did a great job. The thing I love right now, mate, talking of San Diego, is I've got a new team within sight. I've got a new team I'm actually probably almost certainly going to support, Jack. San Diego FC are launching next season. And yesterday, on Monday, we got news of the inaugural home match, which will take place on the 1st of March against St. Louis at Snapdragon. And the match before that, the first ever SDFC game, is LA Galaxy away. So I'll be there among the ultras, I imagine, in the away end, if they have an away end. Absolutely lording it up. So, yeah, I'm really excited, mate. I'm interested to see what the buzz is going to be around this team. Literally a brand new thing. They are building from nothing. There is literally, I like follow all of these different things now on Instagram, and there's actual come along to chant practice. We will learn the chants that we're going to be doing in the stands next season. I'm like, half me is like, oh, that's so cringe. But I'm also like, I guess there's no choice. Like this team, none of the fans know each other. There's 7 different little fan clubs that represent different parts of San Diego, and you've got to choose one to become a member of, basically, so you get into the cheap seats. And then you've all got to get along and learn the songs and the chants. So, yeah, it's really weird, but obviously quite cool.
It's quite weird seeing the genesis of something like this. Obviously, we grew up in a football environment at Craven Cottage where it had existed for 80 years before we rocked up to become a part of it, right? So we kind of turn up and the songs exist, the chants exist, the kind of culture around the club exists, and you meld into that because it's what you're either born into or you decide you're going to become a part of, or whatever the reason behind it. Whereas seeing something actually come from the ground up, now, obviously, San Diego has had USL teams before. It's had teams in different divisions. It's had variety of different soccer outlets over the course of the city's history and soccer's history, right, in the US. But I think when you see something like this beginning, it's quite weird to think, what do you have to do? And I suppose this is it, right? These cultures, which we take for granted as just having existed for our entire lives, don't exist everywhere. And so when something new springs up, and obviously there's a real desire and an appetite to have an MLS team in San Diego, and something to be proud of and cling on to. And look, you and I have spoken a lot recently about baseball. We were talking about the San Diego Padres and why they were important to the city. But I think one of the things that I kind of took from your description of why everyone was so invested in this year's, postseason run, etc., was because a lot of the teams of San Diego have been taken away from San Diego in recent years. So something new to cling on to and actually become a bastion of pride for the city has got to be something incredibly cool. And to go alongside, obviously, the Wave, who have had a pretty good start to life in the NWS.
Yeah, there is that for sure. Obviously, had the San Diego Chargers here when I was in the bar last night. The Chargers were actually playing, and the fans that were there they're there supporting the Chargers. But there's definitely a lot of ill feeling about the fact they've just had a club just gone. So I don't know how
Clippers as well, right, in the NBA.
Yeah, exactly. So it does happen. It won't happen with this team, not in the near future anyway. But it is important that they win because I've said before, people ain't going to go from here if they're not winning. There's too much other stuff to do in San Diego. So they're only going to go and watch a winning team. And I'm already seeing quite a bit of negativity in the groups where people are like, we haven't even got a team. How can we start a season in 4 months? Everyone's like, yeah, the expansion draft's coming in December. That's when we'll get our team together. Don't worry about it. Chucky Lozano is obviously the biggest name on board so far. They've got 4 or 5 players signed up at this stage. I think actually the players that they've got on board look pretty good. But I saw this with LAFC. LAFC absolutely nailed it. From the moment they broke ground on their stadium, built that up, built the fan culture, built the team, built the brand. LAFC absolutely nailed every single section of it. San Diego FC is going to be different because they're going into a stadium that's already here. It's not really a football stadium. It's an American football stadium, really. It's for the college team more than anything. But it's a multi-purpose stadium, which, I'll be honest, is not a great stadium. But they've got to turn that into something that represents this team and kind of make it their home. So that's going to be interesting. And obviously, it's a bit of a buzz right now as they announce these fixtures because we're actually going into MLS playoffs and you're starting to see what you're going to become part of. And it's been an exciting weekend. Obviously, it was decision day and there was all the drama that came with it. For those that don't know, there was drama as LAFC just about pipped LA Galaxy to the title over in the West. It was crazy. Like, you've got to go and see it. If you haven't seen the scenes in LA in terms of LAFC clinching that title, it needs to be seen. But obviously the biggest story of all is Messi. Like, they've set a points record. People expect them to now go on and win MLS Cup. And
the second half hat trick from Messi off the bench is quite something. It's really that kind of moment. You're like, oh, he's just done it again. They're not running out of steam. There's no element of this that feels like they're starting to kind of weaken their hold on anything. Yes, there have been a couple of messy results in recent weeks, no pun intended. But actually, when you kind of look at it and you think about the quality that exists within that, the way that Inter Miami have stepped up in the last couple of weeks to secure that record, which at one point looked, in jeopardy. It felt like they were going to cruise to it at one point. And then suddenly they lost that game and they had those kind of moments. And then there's this mad game against the Crew, which they end up on top of. And they take that with a last minute penalty miss from Cucho. And you're like, oh, maybe they are going to do it. And then suddenly they cruise home. You're like, wow, okay, cool. They've got it. That's theirs. And it's going to be interesting. And the fact they did it against the Revs as well, who obviously held the record beforehand. Very cool. It was a really good decision day, actually, in many ways. And considering that everything was pretty much settled in the West, apart from the title, it felt like a lot happened. And in the East, at the bottom, all we needed was a couple of normal results to happen for the likes of DC United, who boast MLS's Golden Boot winner in Christian Benteke and the Philadelphia Union. And suddenly you're looking at Atlanta United, who have been dreadful, have been all over the place all season, and they have to play against Orlando. You're kind of looking at that thinking Orlando are going to put the boot down. They need to win to secure that home advantage in the playoffs. And they go and win. And you're like, what's going on? And kind of to top all of that, Orlando end up with the home seeding anyway, because Montreal beat New York and put themselves into the wild card game. Like chaos. And look, I don't think either Montreal or Atlanta are going to hold a candle to Inter Miami. Whoever wins that wildcard game, whoever comes up against Inter Miami in that top seed versus bottom seed, you're imagining they're in trouble, right? Yeah. But with all that said, it did just feel like loads and loads and loads happened. It was an incredibly dramatic decision day.
Yeah, absolutely was. I mean, you were talking a second ago about baseball, and there's an iconic World Series about to happen between the Yankees and the Dodgers, right? And there's going to be, sad for you, sad for me, but a lot of people are going to be excited, and it should be captivating, right? And it's two of the biggest brands in the sporting world, right? And you want Inter Miami to get to the final of this, right? Because it's ridiculous if they don't with the players they've got. And it probably is going to be LAFC that give them the best challenge. Like, you can argue about like the positives and negatives to what that really means for the game if these two end up in the final, and like how if they're starting to, LAFC are starting to get a bit of a dominance in the sport at the moment, but we've seen cycles of that already throughout.
Yeah, the Sounders have been pretty dominant.
Yeah, Sounders
exactly. Spells, right?
But Giroud and having
Lloris and
exactly Lloris,
the Griezmann chat that won't go away.
That's the thing, and that's why like LAFC are starting to become a bit iconic. Like LA Galaxy, in terms of a sporting brand, are 100% like one of the most recognizable in terms of if you got to go anywhere across the world, people have heard of LA Galaxy, but mainly because of the name of it, right? It's you can't forget it once you've heard it.
Yeah,
but LAFC,
there was lots of things. They branded themselves really well. They also had a spell of, real dominance in the league. There was some huge names that ended up playing for them, and they got themselves into FIFA career mode. Story that you couldn't escape it. You had to go on loan to LA Galaxy when you were Alex Hunter a couple of years ago on FIFA. So they did some really, really good stuff, right? It's really interesting stuff. But I think you're right in the way that, pushing another team. And again, you saw that from Genesis, right? Not quite as up close, but you saw LAFC kind of form. And that challenge to a City dominance is a really interesting thing. And I think that ultimately those kind of rivalries and the fact that it was the two of them battling it out for top spot this year at the top of the West felt like a good thing for LA in terms of how it pushed the boundaries and how that game has started to become one of the ones that people look out for. I mean, the first game I always look out for always is Seattle against Portland in the Cascadia Cup. And yes, obviously Vancouver are part of that as well. But that's the game, the rivalry that sticks out for me as MLS's best. But I think you're starting to see these now, and El Tráfico is right up there, and a lot of people would have caught bits and bobs of that over the years. I think that the fact that there is a Miami rivalry or Florida rivalry kind of building between Orlando and Miami, that's a good thing that's going to help grow the game. All of these things matter. The Hudson River Derby, all of these things. And when you push these things into the mainstream, they help to drive the narratives that push MLS along and more into the bloodstream, I think, of world football.
Yeah, absolutely that. Yeah, so it's all exciting, mate. I'm looking very much forward to it. So in terms of things I love at the moment, of course, there's loads of other stuff going on in European football. We talk about that all the time, and sometimes we just need to remind ourselves that over here in America, it's still going strong, mate. It's still growing.
Yeah, absolutely. I just quickly want to touch on the game that I watched at the weekend. I went to Stadium Riazor, which is the home of Deportivo La Coruna, who were famous, very, very famous at the turn of the century, won La Liga, had some deep runs in the Champions League, and then kind of fell by the wayside. They do feel like a fallen giant. So to go to Riazor at the weekend and see Depor play and see the passion of that fan base was pretty spectacular, I thought. And to be honest, you can talk about the game and you can talk about what happened. All of these things I think matter. I've got kind of two big takeaways. One, the passion is absolutely undiminished at that stadium. And whilst it was a funny one in that they were singing a lot about Celta Vigo, who are their great Galician rivals, that night, Celta Vigo hosted Real Madrid at Balaídos, and Depor were playing Eldenza, who, by my money, are the fourth biggest side in the Valencian region after their return to even second division football last year. But the fact that they are still there and that rivalry still holds sway, and there's a lot of you've never seen Celta win the league, etc., coming from the Depor fans. I suppose that's, the history there is all they do have to cling on to at the moment. But I thought there were some really exciting players, and getting to see a couple of the youngsters coming through was really fun. It was more kind of Depor because they were far and away the better side in this game. It ended 1-1. And I talked about it a little bit on our Patreon show on Monday, but the thing it reminded me of is Fulham being in the Championship and being the dominant side and watching the time wasting and the way that every goal kick would take 30, 35 seconds, players rolling themselves back onto the pitch when they were injured in order that the game had to be stopped, everyone going down with cramps. I was like, wow. And you could sense this storm brewing, the frustration of the Depor fans as Eldense wasted. And look, fair enough, right? This is a team that plays in front of 4,000 people week in, week out at home. And they go to this stadium with 30,000 Depor fans, a team who once won La Liga. You're still looking at them, even if they've fallen on tough times of late, that's a place to go. That's a giant killing if you do it. And Eldense were very good, I thought, for the first 20 minutes. But pretty much after they scored in about 10-minute mark, and it was a really good goal. There was a player for Eldense called Nacho Quintana, who came through Atleti's ranks. He's 23 years old now. He was absolutely excellent. Played on the right wing. Frustrated me a little bit. He was wearing the number 9 shirt, but it is what it is. And he played Atleti and then eventually joined Sevilla, where he played for their B team a lot. Never made a first team appearance in the league at the very least. But then went off to Lugo and now is at Eldense. So he was very good and very, very quick in transition, very bright, caused headaches, played sort of on the right, but then also up front when they went to a 4-4-2 later in the game. Thought he was very good. I was impressed with him. But the majority of the play from basically the 20-minute mark onwards was very much Depor just bashing themselves against a wall, trying to break down this Eldense defence. And a couple of really interesting players, I thought. One of them, Brighton fans might recognise, David Meyer. He was linked with Brighton last summer. He's Depor pretty much born and bred. I think he's been in their youth academy since he was 12. He's tiny and he's red raw. Like red raw. One of those players that gets his head down and just runs. He was part, I think, of the Spain under-19 team that ended up winning the European Championships. He's really, really fast. But one of those players that you sort of see, bright mop of like shock electric blonde hair. And he just gets the ball out to him and off he goes in a straight line. You're like, wow, okay. If someone can control what he's got going on there, you've got a very good player in your hands. 19 years old, so a lot of time to grow into it as well. But looks really, really exciting and one to keep an eye on in that one, I think. But the best player on the park was a player called Jeremiah Hernandez, who wears the number 10 shirt for Depor. He has had a lot of random clubs in his youth career. So he's born in Las Palmas in the Canary Islands, played for Las Palmas, and then moved to Real Madrid's academy when he was 12. Then he joined Depor at 14 and came through with the reserves, and now is very much a fixture in this first team at 21 years old. He is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. 5'7", rapid, brilliant footwork, incredibly technical. The things you'd expect from a sort of winger number 10 in the Spanish system, right? He's hitting all the boxes, but also his work rate and his physical ability. The best moment I thought in the game, he had some wonderful things going on up top. But the best moment in the game was when he ran back 70 yards to shoulder barge a striker coming through on goal off the ball on the break, to win possession back, took the ball, picked it up and drove straight back into the Eldenza half, like past 4 or 5 players. Like, wow, this kid's quite special. And so he's got a couple of appearances now for Spain's under-21s, and it's been interesting kind of watching him develop in that sense. I was reading about him after the game, and they were saying he has to play a very different role he plays for Depor, where he's very much the kind of, I use this phrase loads, but the lightning rod of all their creativity, right? And the attack, the ball goes to Yeremai when they need something to happen. And for Spain, he was obviously stepping up into this under-21 side that's been pretty dominant at youth level. There's a lot of very talented players in it. He needs to have a slightly different attitude to it. But it's interesting watching him play, but I fancy that this kid is not going to be in the Segunda for very long. He has La Liga, kind of maybe a lower down a little bit to begin with, but I think he's got everything. I really, really enjoyed watching him play. He stood out like a sore thumb in terms of his quality, but also the way that he worked. It was amazing. And then it was nice to see, kind of on the other end of the spectrum, Lucas Perez, who obviously moved back to Depor when they were in the 3rd tier last season, took a massive wage cut. I think he moved from something like 300,000 or 200,000 a week to like 13,000 a week in order to play for his boyhood team, fired them to promotion, wearing the armband now, takes all of the corners, takes all of the free kicks, and he produced a beautiful cross for the equaliser, which was headed in. Really nice to see. And the passion undiminished from Lucas Perez, who's obviously been around the houses, had some time in the Premier League, obviously had quite a lot of time in La Liga, but it was incredible, right? Watching him play and the respect that the stadium, but also his teammates have for Lucas Perez, just like sublime. Great to see him. The only black mark on the whole thing was that Charlie Patino, formerly of Arsenal and obviously famously at Blackpool, didn't get off the bench. So didn't get to see Charlie Patino. Sad. But I think he's still adapting to life at Depor after making quite a bold move to kind of join them.
You could have gone for a beer with him or something. You could have at least given him something to do.
Given him a call. He might have joined us afterwards for a little sangria, a tinto de verano. But it was great to see, and I had a wonderful time at Depor. And Riazor to anybody's stadium of this, incredible place to watch game from.
Oh, brilliant, mate. Yeah, it's always good to get out and about and spot new players. So you need to keep an eye on those, see if your scouting eye is as good as it sounds like it is. Just a shout out to everyone as well to remember you can join us on Patreon. Jack did give us the lowdown on his trip as well over there the other day. You'll always get a bit more detail, a bit more relaxed off the cuff chat on Patreon. And so if you like what you hear on Ranks FC, please don't forget that we are also over there with a loyal army of the Rank squad that follow us every week. You can ask your questions. We'll answer as many as we can every Monday. And every Friday, you get your preview show as well. The link will be in the description. Please do consider coming to join us.
Yeah, we would love to have you over there.
Good Christmas present, actually. Get ahead of time. Get a year's subscription.
Off you go. There you go. It's all there. It's all there. Right. Let's leave things we love there. It was great to have it back. After the break, we're going to be going into the main topic of this episode. We're talking a little bit about some of the transfer dilemmas that are facing Premier League clubs ahead of this January window. Don't go anywhere.
At T. Rowe Price, our curiosity lights the way to help you plan ahead for what matters to you most. Work directly with us, and together we can help uncover the right investments for you at every stage of your life, whatever your goals. That's the power of curiosity. Better questions, better outcomes. T. Rowe Price. Invest with confidence. Visit troweprice.com/investdirect to learn more.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix and match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.
Welcome back to Ranks FC, where it's time for our main topic. And I have enlisted our transfer guru, Mr. Dean Jones, to basically prep the groundwork for this one. Dean, we're talking about a lot of clubs here in the Premier League who are already looking or have eyes on January in terms of reinforcing how they've started this season or starting to actually make up for issues that they have suffered already. Now, some of those are injury related. The likes of Rodri and Manchester City obviously jumps out in that regard. Some of them are contract related in terms of what they're looking for next summer and if they're going to actually hammer down on the players they've already got or look to twist their hand. There's loads to get through. So I'm going to give you the floor and we'll start to work through some of those dilemmas that face clubs in January.
Yeah, let's start by talking about Liverpool. Obviously, they've made a great start to life under Arne Slot, but they didn't make any major waves in the transfer market since he's come in. They signed Chiesa as a little deal. They got Mamardashvili coming in next year. So nothing significant really in terms of what they wanted this year. Zubimendi looks like he was going to be the big one. It fell through and then they decided not to sign another central midfielder. It's gone okay so far. They've got away with it, probably more than got away with it. A couple of players.
I was going to say that's a bit harsh on Gravenberch, who's been an absolute revelation.
Gravenberch's been a complete revelation. And then, at the weekend you get Curtis Jones having a storming game in central midfield alongside him. So everything is going okay. But obviously there's the depth issue and there's the contract situations of Trent Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk and Mohamed Salah. None of these players have yet committed to a new contract and their contracts all expire at the end of this season. Now, that's probably the biggest problem right now for Liverpool, is that they need this to be addressed ASAP. Once you get to January, they can sign pre-contracts with foreign clubs. And obviously, the one you're hearing most about at this stage is Trent and the chase of Real Madrid and the pursuit of him. It was interesting because a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to somebody who said, yeah, there's nothing active on this. Like, they just want him on a free transfer, basically. They want him on a free transfer at the end of the season. And they're waiting to see if he signs that new deal at Liverpool. And if he doesn't, they'll sign him. Then something really weird happened over the international break. And Marca started coming out with headlines. And a lot of the time, what happens with Marca is that it's basically accepted that they are just drip-fed stories from the club itself. And it's almost like a PR machine that works for the club and gets messages out there and puts pressure on situations. And suddenly headlines come out saying Trent won't sign new contracts at Liverpool and Liverpool know it, basically, is what the gist of the story was. Liverpool aren't very impressed by this. They knew that Madrid were keeping an eye on the situation, but they, as they understood it and thought the case would be, was that Madrid would be passive until that situation became something they could actually take advantage of. So that's a little bit aggressive from Madrid, really. Liverpool don't like it, but they're putting a deaf ear to it for now and just ignoring any noise that is coming their way from Spain. The problem is that, as I was told when I spoke to someone at the end of last week, I said, the thing is, Liverpool and Real Madrid play each other at the end of November, and that's when the playbook will come out. The build up around that game, that's when the machine will start to turn on again, and there'll be more headlines around Trent if he hasn't signed his Liverpool contract. Liverpool still have some hope, some belief that he will. But Trent has said himself, like, it ultimately comes down to the fact he wants to win trophies. He says he wants to captain Liverpool one day. He's made positive noises. He's playing pretty well this season for them. I don't think there's any chance that he's going to down tools or anything like that. End of the day, it's Real Madrid and it's one club that can always turn your head. So there's that situation going on in the background. Virgil van Dijk's spoken a little bit more positively this week about the fact that there has been some contact in terms of him signing a new contract at Liverpool to extend beyond this season. And then there's the Salah situation, which who knows? I mean, one part of me thinks just part ways at this point. Another part of me thinks, is that the stupidest thing you could ever do because he's still Mo Salah? It doesn't feel as influential as in past years, but when you look at his numbers, when you look at how he makes a difference in big moments.
And how he played at the weekend against Chelsea, right? Where he stepped up again in that game.
He steps up. Incredible. But you could argue, what's the most difficult one to replace? And there are loads of wide attacking players who are really good, right? You can sign somebody else. I mean, they've got Chiesa right now, but it's Mo Salah. It's like an icon of a football club. And the thing is, I saw someone arguing the other day, it was like, well, Liverpool have moved on from great players before. Like, Liverpool have a long history of moving on eventually from club legends. You've got to do it at some point. It's just getting the timing of it right. And because they're in a new era under a new manager, that's what they've got to carefully decide upon right now. In terms of January and how this affects them, I am mainly looking to see if Liverpool sign a centre-back or a central midfielder. That's what I envisage most happening. I don't think they're going to panic here at all. Even if these contract situations aren't sorted, I don't think that they'll go and sign replacements in January. I'll be honest with you, I don't even think the January market for the biggest clubs is going to be that busy. But the centre-back is one that I could see them moving in. There have been a fair amount of rumours about players they potentially might go for. We're not really going to go into all of the ins and outs of the transfer targets on this show. We're more highlighting the dilemmas that they face and what they might do. But yeah, because they've got away with the Zubimendi situation, they've found players within the squad that have helped them adapt to that. I do wonder if actually it's just finding another centre-back. Jared Branthwaite's name keeps coming up, Jack, as somebody that could end up at Liverpool. And he's got his own contract situation at Everton right now. Hasn't signed. I don't think he will sign a new contract with Everton. So, yeah, there's a few situations like that to look out for.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, right? And actually kind of Liverpool's modus operandi, shall we say, in the transfer market in January or maybe looking forward is going to be an interesting one because it looked, as you say, with the Zubimendi deal that they were looking in the summer to bring in a new central defensive midfielder who was going to be a bona fide starter, right? Who was going to look to play every game, every important game at the very least for Liverpool, who they'd want to have, making 40 appearances a season. Now maybe that situation has changed and I wonder what they're looking at in terms of how they play this moving forward because obviously Stefan Bajcetic has moved out on loan to RB Salzburg. Obviously we've seen Tyler Morton go on loan last season and do very well in the Championship at Hull. Whether he kind of has a future at Liverpool up for debate, I think, but there's definitely been some noises and positive noises about what his future looks like. Whether they kind of move in here for a kind of future proofing or they're willing to kind of go all out for a first team starter is going to be interesting. And in these positions in particular, I feel like they might go for the absolute first teamer from a centre back perspective. But I think in terms of where they're looking in terms of midfield, one, how much faith they have in Morton and Bajcetic to come in and actually fulfill this role. But if not, where are you looking? Because a lot of the excellent young centre backs or centre midfielders, in Europe moved in the summer. And someone like Lamine Camara, who moved from Metz to Monaco and has been tearing it up, obviously has had that move already. And Monaco, I think, are a club that Liverpool could buy from. But it's not necessarily easy when someone moves in the summer and he can't move now in January again. So where do they look? And if it is going to be a young player, maybe it's someone like Matteo Prati, who's doing a very, very good job at Cagliari. Maybe it's someone like Eric Martel. Maybe that's one for the summer, who got relegated last year with Cologne, but is seen as one of the excellent young defensive midfielders across Europe. It's all quite intriguing in that regard. There's been a lot of links to Omar Marmoush in terms of replacing Salah. And whilst there is obviously a little bit of, it's quite contrived, obviously bringing through another Egypt international and being like, yeah, he can be the heir to Salah's throne, both internationally and maybe for Liverpool. I'm not 100% sure how much of it I believe in terms of speculation, but considering the way he's played for Eintracht this season, I can absolutely see why clubs are interested. And hey, maybe there is going to be a kind of heir to the throne in terms of the Egyptian king.
Yeah, I mean, Marmoush is definitely, in my transfer world, a player that is making waves at the moment and definitely somebody that is on the radar of a lot of clubs. I've definitely started to hear more about him. If you think of last season in Bundesliga, it was all about Girassi and Boniface and Sesko and Openda, and this season it is Omar Marmoush. God, that's a hard one to say. That is coming onto the radar as like the latest Bundesliga talent. I mean, it's Liverpool are linked at the moment, but there's also clubs like West Ham and Newcastle and Aston Villa, and they're kind of that level of team that are being linked with him too. And it's all about where it evens out, I guess, but he's definitely one that's going to be talked about a lot over the next 6 months.
Okay, all right, let's park Liverpool there and move onwards. Who's next in your list?
Yeah, let's talk about Manchester City here. You already addressed them coming into the chat in terms of the Rodri situation. The thing is, right, for Manchester City right now, what we're looking at is a legacy plan. They really, really need to figure out what happens next. So the kind of bombshell about Cheeky Begiristain leaving Man City at the end of this season was obviously already known internally. Like there was a meeting in the summer and they all started to kind of figure out what the plan was going to be. And a lot of people have thought, well, Cheeky and Pep will probably leave at the same time. Like they're very close to one another. I don't personally think that City really wanted that news to come out in the moment that it did, but it was leaking and they just had to go with it. So now we're left wondering not only what happens in the transfer market and with the rebuild and the next version of Man City, but is Pep Guardiola staying as well? Now, my information and my hunch is that Pep does stay. I personally get the feeling that we're going to see one more year of Pep, which takes him into a decade at the helm at the Etihad, right?
I think he'd become their longest serving manager since like the 60s, if that's the case.
Is it right? Yeah. And I mean, it feels right that we get to a decade of Pep. And I think that there's probably that drive and motivation still there because there is genuine competition in the Premier League at the moment. If Man City were running away with the league, then I think he could probably have more reason to just think, like, I've had enough of this. I'm going to wait for my next fun job. But because Arsenal and Liverpool are continuing to challenge them, because there's always the competition of the Champions League, and also just like he's got Haaland and it feels like unfulfilled still somehow. Like even with all the goals that Haaland scored, you're like, I've got like the best striker potentially that we'll see in the next 10 years. Like what else can I get out of him? What else can I do with this team? But obviously there's a lot of knock-on effects here as to like, who would join Man City because they need to know what the plan is, who's the manager going to be. And the players right now that are considering new contracts also want to be like, well, is Pep here or is Pep not here? So I think that by the time we get to December, I think in the next month, we find out what's happening with Pep. That's my expectation around this. And on the back of that, we'll get further news on players like Erling Haaland signing a new contract. We'll find out. Look, Rodri will sign a new contract, I'm almost certain, even though he's out injured at the moment. I still think Rodri signs a new contract this season. John Stones, the hero of the weekend, he's got a contract that expires, I think once we get to the new year, of 18 months left. So John Stones, by the end of the season, he'll sign a new contract, I expect. But Haaland's the one, right? Haaland's the one you just want to know, like, what is happening next with Erling Haaland? Because there'll always be like, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, like, where's Haaland going to go next? But I've got a feeling that if Pep does stay, then quite soon after that, we end up finding out that Haaland is also committing to a new contract. Obviously, it doesn't mean necessarily that he's staying at Man City long term, but it just gives everyone that boost. And that also means that we find out what other transfer business they can do. The fact that City didn't really do anything in the summer in the end, they got Gundogan in late doors. Obviously, Savio was coming in, yeah. But there was quite a lot of expectation that another midfielder, at least one more, would come in. There was a lot of chat around Paqueta, Bruno Guimaraes, Dani Olmo. There were a few different ones that were linked, and none of it ended up happening. I still think Man City do a deal in January. I think that central midfield position at the moment is just looking a little bit iffy. It'll be interesting. I think this week we'll probably see Matheus Nunes get an extended opportunity to kind of make a case for himself. Obviously, they've got a Champions League game, and then they've got Southampton at the weekend. I think Man City have got. They feel like the sort of games where he could get an extended run out, if not a start. And that's something that Man City are probably going to be considering, because we're in a situation where they've got by without Rodri so far. But when you watch the weekend and the kind of whoever links up with Kovacic basically in the middle, it's just not working. Even Rico Lewis, he's gone off the boil a little bit at the moment. So I just don't think that there's complete clarity and confidence that that situation is cemented. And if you're going to play Gundogan and Kovacic, you can't do that every week and get away with it, I'm afraid, in the level of competition that Man City are at. So let's see where they end up turning. But I do expect that Man City side a midfielder in Jan.
Yeah, I'm quite intrigued as to what kind of position that player ends up playing, because you mentioned some of the names there that were linked in the summer, and Dani Olmo, I think, is the one that stands out, right? Paqueta as well, a player that's kind of more of an attacking threat than you'd imagine than pushing backwards into that defensive midfield role. There was also this question mark of kind of what happens if Rodri gets injured, which obviously has now occurred. But also, like, could you get someone that was able to rotate with him and then maybe step in for him when he was absent? And so whether that player is a defensively minded player or an attack minded player, I think it's going to be really intriguing to see where kind of City's mind is here, because there's also the kind of overlooming spectre of Kevin De Bruyne and what that looks like going forward. And that's not me saying that De Bruyne will leave in the summer, because I don't know. But equally, I think that his output and the amount of minutes he's been able to get over recent seasons has diminished, right? So you're looking at, yes, Phil Foden being able to fill that gap, but we saw Julian Alvarez fill that gap a lot last season. He's no longer at the club. So do they look now for a player like a Samuel Ricci, who's linked with them, obviously, who I really like? And I think technically and from a defensive standpoint, Ricci looks excellent. His ability to switch play, his ability to, get his head up and play a couple of passes ahead feels like the kind of thing that will fit really nicely into a Pep system, right? But are they looking for that kind of player, or are they looking for an all-action player in the middle who's able to kind of do it at both ends? And you maybe look to someone like a Nicolo Barella, who's been linked away from Inter for years. I don't think there's many clubs that could tempt Barella away, but I think that City might be one of them. You're kind of looking at that and thinking, "Oh,
is this ITK information that I should be writing up for Give Me Sport, Jack?"
No, I don't think so. I'm just kind of spitballing here generally. But,
I like it.
Thinking about who might come in and what kind of profile, I suppose, City are looking for in this player. Is it someone who's able to be a Rodri replacement / rotator? In which case, someone like Samuel Ricci, I think, makes a lot of sense from Torino, and young. And kind of 25 million mark. It feels like an approachable fee for a club of City size. I think he's excellent. And I think that he has the capability to be a stalwart in this Italy midfield for years and years to come. I really do rate him highly. But he's not the player you're looking for, I don't think, if you're looking for someone to fill in that gap for creativity that De Bruyne might leave whenever he decides to, one, leave City, or two, if he can actually fulfill the same role he's fulfilled in recent seasons. So actually what the profile of that player is and where those links, and when those links develop, I think is going to be very interesting to kind of just keep an eye on.
Yeah, Adam Wharton is somebody that I will put on everybody's radar as somebody that, if they're looking for a kind of Rodri replacement type, Wharton loves Rodri. He's talked about him there's been a couple of interviews where he's really spoken of his admiration for him and how he watches his play and how he kind of wants to be that sort of footballer, kind of already is that sort of footballer. And given how Crystal Palace's season is going at the moment, I know Wharton hasn't been there very long. Palace did very well to get him when they did, because they kind of jumped the queue that was starting to build for Wharton. He's got some Premier League experience. Now he's showing that he can cut it. I do wonder if he might be at least on the short list of options that City look for. But then obviously you're going to just have that. I wonder if they've been burned a little bit recently with, Matheus Nunes not really working out that well. Calvin Phillips didn't work very well. I think they might have be a little bit cautious about what they sign, but I know that Wharton is definitely somebody that they like.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's move it on to the third team on your list. Who's next?
Yeah, before we go to break, let's just discuss Newcastle United, because they're in a really interesting situation, Newcastle. And for me, a lot of it centres around Alex Isak and what happens across the next year for him. Now, on a personal level, he's not having a very good season. You look at his numbers, and he scored 1 Premier League goal. You watch his performances, and you're like, oh, he's like, there's an air shot there. Oh, perhaps he should have scored that one. I personally feel like all season long, Alex Isak has been like one step away from like scoring in every single match.
Yeah, just but like slightly off the pace. I think that's a reasonable criticism to make.
It's like he's so close to having a goal a game. It's just been a really weird observation. I've watched like extensively Newcastle this season. One of the good things about actually living in America that I'm enjoying is the coverage on Peacock and like how the replays of all the full 90s of all the games that you can get so quickly. And like I'm having a lot more time to actually sit and watch the entirety of all these games, even while I'm working, and you can keep all the matches on. So I'm watching Isak quite closely, and a lot of reason because I had him in my fantasy team at the start of the year, and I was convinced he was going to start sharp. It's like the ball's just not quite reaching him. He's making the right runs. I still think he'll be good. Newcastle's still fully happy with him. But Alex Isak obviously has high ambitions and expectations, not just of himself, but of his career. And Newcastle have to match that. Now, they want him to sign a new contract. If he did sign a contract, there's the potential that it would have a release clause in it, and Isak has to decide whether or not he wants that and whether that helps him. But equally, as I was speaking to somebody this week, if Newcastle don't qualify for Europe this season, Alex Isak ain't going to hang around any longer. And that is quite interesting. So what does happen next, and what do Newcastle do about that in January? But they've been talking about signing a right-sided attacker for some time, but there's also been talk of them signing a striker. They've been linked with someone like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, for example, like quite a few times. And I think his contract situation means that will continue for now. But that is something for me to look out for. Like Callum Wilson, obviously not really in the picture. Anthony Gordon's been having to fill in as a centre forward at times, which I don't think is ideal. And currently, as we look at it today, as we record on Tuesday, Newcastle are 9th in the Premier League. And yeah, they're only 3 points off the 5th place, which could end up being a Champions League position.
Yep.
But there's a lot of competition for those top places. So at the moment, the only team that's above them that probably isn't expected to be mingling in that sort of region is Nottingham Forest, who are currently 8th, which fair play to them. They're having a really good season.
Yeah, they've had a cracking start to the season. They're playing once a week, and also that centre-back partnership is up there with the best in the division, and we're seeing that in terms of how few goals they're conceding, right?
Yeah, but even if they fall away, then you've got Man United in 12th, who, you know, irrelevant of whether they actually end up qualifying for Europe, they'll be higher than 12th by the time the season ends, and they'll be in the top half of the table.
Famous last words, that.
And you would expect that West Ham can turn around their season, and they're currently 15th, but you would think that West Ham somehow end up in the top half of the table as well. So there's competition, a lot of competition for Newcastle to make those European positions. I think Newcastle probably do need to sign an attacker in the January window, and one that is a pretty significant signing.
Okay, I mean that's a big kind of ask for a club who obviously had to play within the rules in terms of PSR. We saw a few players who have been excellent this season. Elliot Anderson, who's done a great job at Forest, but also Yankuba Minter, who has been excellent for Brighton. The fact that Newcastle had to offload those players in the summer in order to comply with the various rules, I think makes this a very difficult ask to go and make a real statement signing in January.
The rules have changed a bit though since then, and I think they're in a slightly different situation now. Okay. At least that's what I'm led to believe, that it's opened up a little bit more for them. I'm not saying they're going to go and make a £70 million signing in attack, but you've got to remember, if Isak does end up leaving, it's going to be somebody like an Arsenal or a Chelsea or somebody of that kind of level that ends up buying him, and his price is going to be sky high, right? So you're also going to have that money eventually coming in if he does.
Sure, but you've got to bank on it, right? And you can't go out and sign let's say a Victor Gyökeres. And look, I don't think Newcastle are going to sign Gyökeres anyway, but you can't go out and make that kind of bid without Isak having kind of left, right? You can't gamble on the idea that
because Isak won't leave in Jan. They won't sell him in Jan. He's too important to them and all of that kind of stuff. So But yeah, in terms of a transfer dilemma, Alex Isak will definitely be causing a bit of head scratching right now.
Yeah, and considering that Newcastle are kind of under new management in that regard after Dan Ashworth left, it's going to be intriguing to see how they go about their business. But I will be keeping an eye on that because Newcastle feel like they have work to do. Like you say, they don't feel like they're miles off it, but they're off it enough that this could offset the season, and that could have some pretty devastating consequences in terms of what they're trying to build, right? So absolutely, I completely get it. And with that, I think we are going to take a break, and afterwards we'll be talking about the remaining two teams. Don't go anywhere.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix-and-match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.
Welcome back to Ranks FC. It's our third and final part. There's two more teams left to discuss. Dean, are we coming to the capital?
We are, yeah. The last two are both from London. I'm going to start with Tottenham, actually. It's tough to read where Tottenham are right now. Obviously, they are inconsistent, even across 90 minutes at the moment. And Ange is striving to play entertaining, but football that counts, basically. They've got to count towards points at the end of the day. And unfortunately, Tottenham just this season haven't managed to blend those two things and put together whole performances that end in 3 points. And that's something which is definitely coming under the microscope right now. But I don't think that Ange is finished with his team build. And I think that has to be remembered right now. Like, he's probably halfway through it.
Yeah, maybe a bit more than that, considering the youngsters that have come in. But yeah, it's going to take time. I get that.
It's going to take time because, like, you've still got a few that just aren't going to work out. A few, like, fillers, like Timo Werner, like, he's just filling a gap for this season. Timo Werner's not going to be a long-term player. He's not even supposed to be a first-team player as regularly probably as he has been this season. But they've got to kind of have a bit better luck in terms of injuries, but also find the consistency of performances in their top players that they need. Now, in terms of dilemmas, they've got a couple, really, as far as I'm concerned. One of them is Richarlison. Richarlison is a big problem for Tottenham because they spent a lot of money on him. And they need to recoup that, right? Daniel Levy's not the type of man that is going to just let Richarlison go for £25 million because he's just not lived up to the expectations and the hype. So, again, I'm sure the Saudi chat will come back around for Richarlison. But ultimately, Spurs need to play Richarlison into top form so that they can get top dollar out of him. So that means that Richarlison's got to stay fit. They've got to manage his minutes carefully. They've also got to trust him to give him the opportunities to score the goals that then gives Ange another selection dilemma in terms of where he actually fits into his front line. But Richarlison, for me, is really key because he either becomes one of the star names of this team or leaves. But to leave, he's still got to have had a very good season to get the 50-odd million pound that you want for him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, some of that fee will have been amortized, right, by this point, because he's been there a couple of seasons. So they'll have swallowed some of it in that regard. So getting, I don't know, £30 million back for Richarlison would probably equal, in terms of value, what they paid for him in that regard. It would take him off the books in that regard. But I do still think it's interesting in terms of how he gets into this team because he's not going to play over club captain Son. He's not going to play over record signing Dominic Solanke. And he's not going to play over kind of Mr. Goals Brennan Johnson at the moment. Mm-hmm. So he's going to have to find a way of working himself into this team. But it doesn't feel like an easy route right now, especially with someone who's been so mercurial in terms of what he's done. And that's probably doing him a service. I think ultimately he's flattered to deceive in a Spurs shirt. It does feel like he needs to go somewhere else in order to kind of kindle his career. But I don't know where that is. And also, I don't know who's going to pay the kind of money that Spurs are going to want for him And he's made it quite clear that he doesn't want to go to Saudi Arabia at this point in his career. He wants to be able to work his way back into maybe the Brazil squad, but also, kind of re-establish himself as a player that people respect rather than use as a figure of fun. And whether you think that's right or wrong, and I don't think anybody should be kind of made into a meme in some ways, but ultimately you have to change that outcome or that kind of view of yourself by performing. And Richarlison really hasn't almost ever in a Spurs shirt.
No, exactly. And his new problem, obviously, is that they've now got Dominic Solanke. Like, Tottenham went out and they spent the big money on Dom Solanke. He is their leading 9. Like, he's going to be starting every single week unless he's not fit. They've invested money into him. They fully believe in him. They love the way he triggers the press. They love the way that he is like lurking around the box, like to just be a poacher. You'll see the amount of goals that Solanke scores on follow-ups and stuff like that. Like, they love it. That's what they want. He's the Harry Kane replacement that they were kind of waiting for. But Richarlison's future was in doubt coming into this season already, and it's difficult to see how they get enough out of him to certainly increase or even hold value. We're going back to the summer. They were also open to a lot of players leaving. There was Bissouma, there was Skip, there was Lo Celso, Højbjerg, Rodon, Spence, Reguilon, Sessegnon, Davis, Emerson, and Ndombele, Hill, Solomon. Like, it was like a mass clear out that they were happy to have because they knew it had to happen for Ange to get this squad, not just terms of like profiling, but also mentality to where he wanted it to be. And they did a lot of that work. Like, a lot of those players that I've just listed aren't at the club anymore, even if it's temporarily. And again, once we get to January, there will be decisions being made on how they move forwards with those players they didn't get rid of from that list, but also how they fix some of the ones that they did. I think Højbjerg was a bit of a mistake. There have been games this season where I'm like, I think you could have done with Højbjerg, Like, there have definitely been moments in terms of game management when they have lacked somebody like that. So I wonder if they go and sign a central midfielder. They're certainly being linked with a few at the moment, so that suggests to me that they're at the very least scouting around that. Yeah,
Ricci is on their radar as well by the sounds of things. Now, if City are in the ballpark, then you imagine that Spurs are going to get blown out of the water in that regard. But you can understand why they're in a similar kind of position. And actually, a lot of those players that I kind of listed earlier when we were talking about Liverpool, right? Matteo Prati, for example, I'd imagine is on Spurs' radar as well. These are the players that they should be looking at, not necessarily as young, perhaps, as they've gone with Archie Gray or Bergvall, but still someone who can grow into this team and isn't going to cost them an absolute fortune, because that doesn't feel like the way that Spurs want to operate or are going to operate with Ange Postecoglou at the helm. So you kind of discuss those in a slightly different light. But I can imagine them going in for a player, maybe from abroad who is already playing at a relatively high level, but obviously has some space to grow in terms of what level they're playing at on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, absolutely that. And they're scouting players in Holland and places like that at the moment where there's definite chances of finding players at good value, but also in able to step up to the exact type of player that Ange is looking for in every respect. So yeah, there are definitely possibilities around that. And then they were probably a centre-back short as well. I mean, the one thing you have got at Tottenham is a player like Archie Gray, who they signed in the summer, who is so versatile. I don't know where he's going to end up yet. He's been playing centre-mid quite a bit when he has played this season. But ultimately, I would have expected Archie Gray to end up probably when he's like...
I think he started almost every position apart from centre-mid, right? He's played as centre-back in the Europa League. He's played at right-back. He's played at left-back. He is a centre midfielder by trade, in inverted commas, but he played pretty much all of last season at right back for Leeds at times. So you kind of look at where he's at and what his future looks like. I think it's a really interesting question as to where Spurs see Archie Gray long term.
Yeah, sorry, did I say he has played? I mean, like, that's where he's expected to play. Yeah, like that's what you expect him to become, but it's not. It's very unclear as to where they're actually going to play him, and I think they would give him those opportunities too, but I don't know exactly what the plan is. Jed Spence has completely turned around his future at Tottenham, which also raises the question, just to end this part of Tottenham, around Pedro Porro, who is also on Real Madrid's list if they don't get Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, This one's
He'll be
interesting.
on City's list as well now, especially now that Hugo Viana is coming in there, and he's someone that he's always said he regretted letting leave Sporting. So actually,
Yeah.
I would be very surprised if City don't have an eye on that one, especially given it's someone that came through the City system.
Absolutely. Now, the difference, obviously, between Porro and Trent is that Porro does have a contract and he ain't going to be cheap. But as I spoke to someone last week about this, they were like, let's be honest, Levy would sell at the right price. If you get like, what, 70 million pounds for Porro, which isn't impossible anymore in terms of like elite fullbacks.
Even 50, I think you're probably having the conversation.
15, right? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. But I think they could raise it. He would definitely raise it higher than that if Real Madrid were to genuinely come in for him. There's even been talk, one source mentioned to me, that he could see Real Madrid trying to sign Porro and Trent because they don't actually see them as being alike. And I was like, that's okay, fair. Like, they'd be quite bold to go and sign Trent and Porro. But yeah, certainly raises a question again. Maybe that's why Jed Spence just signed a new contract at Tottenham. Maybe it's just to be like, okay, well, let's get him signed up because he is doing quite well now and just make sure that he's not going anywhere. And if that question mark is there for Porro in the new year, then it's something that we consider if the bid comes in high enough.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Who is our final team?
Let's wrap it up with a bit of Chelsea, shall we? They're doing much better than I expected them to this season. Hold my hands up to that one. If you listen to the Patreon, you'll know that one of our most loyal ranked squad members, Darius, has been... well, he's just delighted when I'm wrong about Chelsea. Of course he is, because he's a big Chelsea fan. And I really didn't have high expectations for Chelsea. I didn't think, basically, that Maresca could fix enough of this quickly enough. And he's proving me wrong at the moment, apart from his defence. For me, Robert Sanchez is a liability. And at the moment, what I'm being told is that Maresca is going to continue to trust him. He's going to continue to support him. And he will remain...
It's not like he has loads of options, but actually, famously, he has about 9.
He has 9 other options because Chelsea have more goalkeepers than anybody else in world football combined. It's crazy how many goalkeepers Chelsea have got on the books, and they've got some good ones as well, right? But so they've got to analyse this in January. What is going to happen with Sanchez? Do they continue to trust him? It's obviously I'm sorry, it's just not me that thinks this, but like his distribution out the back, like, is just a nightmare. Like, it must be so nerve-wracking for Chelsea fans anytime they try and play it around at the back, because almost every game he gets caught out and ends up being shut down.
This was meant to be one of his strengths. This was why he was pushed back into the team.
I know. But they did kind of a 180 on this in the summer when it was expected that they would sign a new goalkeeper, and they were like, no, Maresca's going to give him a chance here. He's going to be the number one. It's like, okay.
They did sign Philip Jorgensen. They just haven't really played him outside of Europe.
Yeah, exactly. And Petrovic was in last season. He's out on loan. He's actually doing really well out on loan as well. So that's interesting. So look out for the goalkeeper situation. I don't know that they'll necessarily sign another one because they surely don't need one. But there are situations coming up, say at the end of the season, where Aaron Ramsdale, who they've been linked with a lot, will be available, despite the fact that Southampton are not doing very well this season. Ramsdale's actually doing pretty well. He's holding his own. He's holding his own, yeah. And obviously, like, you're still wondering about Chelsea's defence and what happens at the back. You've got Ben Chilwell will surely leave the club. But I'm still not convinced about the centre-backs either. I don't know them necessarily buy a centre-back in January.
I think it's fine when it's Fofana and Colwill. That it feels like Chelsea have things under control. It's as soon as anybody else steps in. And look, again, there's an absolute wealth of centre-backs here, but is there a wealth of centre-back depth that they can rely on? And look, Tosin, I think, was lucky to stay on the pitch in terms of what he said. And we said it in the summer that obviously we watched him a lot at Fulham and he was a perfectly capable centre-back at Fulham's level. I felt kind of where he was at. He stepped up to Chelsea, and I think some of those flaws have been exposed already in his game. There are already the Chelsea fans talking about the fact that every time they see him on the ball, they feel worried. And I get that, right? Because ultimately that's what we saw at Craven Cottage. It's not like we're seeing anything that's wildly out of the ordinary. On a free transfer, was he a good signing? Well, yes, because he's worth more than £0. But actually, when you kind of look at where he fits in here and how shaky Chelsea look when it's not Fofana and Colwill at the back and as that partnership, it kind of leads you to be like, well, how are they going to fix this? And yet the amount of centre-backs still on the books feels like it's quite a difficult one for Chelsea to fix in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. And just to finish, like, let's just look at the attack. They've obviously got like way more players than they need in those attacking positions. And one of the things I talked about on Patreon this week was the fact that while a lot of people think, oh, it's good that he's got all these options to call upon, I'm like, is it though? Because there's so many that he's got to keep happy, and he feels forced to make substitutes in every game because they're all literally just sat there waiting for their go. But I'm not going to rule out the fact that Chelsea go and sign a number 9. It still feels like something that they probably lack. It still feels like if you had a proper number 9 on Cole Palmer's wavelength, that you might have something special. Like Palmer has great link-ups with Madueke, he has great link-ups with Jadon Sancho. Is okay with Nicholas Jackson. Like, I think Nicholas Jackson is actually having a decent season. I'm not going to sit here and knock him.
100%. Like, it's far improved, I think, on where we were last year. And obviously, there is that element of kind of rawness that's being drilled out of him in terms of what he was. And the fact is, we were talking about a winger that's converted to a centre forward, and he played in a very specific system at Villarreal that kind of got the best out of some of those runs, but it doesn't make him a lone 9 in a Premier League team. And I think we saw that in the first season, but it's improved. And if it continues to improve, then there is every chance that Nicholas Jackson becomes one of the Premier League's best strikers. I don't think that's mad to say at this point because the raw tools are in his locker. But if Chelsea are trying to immediately push themselves back into the conversation around titles for next season, do they have the time to wait for that? And look, I really hope the answer is yes. And I mean that in terms of it should make sense that Chelsea have the ability to coach a player like Nicholas Jackson to fulfill his potential, which is incredibly high. But as soon as they get back into the Champions League, which might be this year, it might be next year, we don't know when it will be, but it will come. Do they have the time to wait for that to then push themselves back into a title conversation that right now still feels like it's a jump above them? Not miles above them, but a jump above them.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. And you've got to consider that they were looking at Victor Osimhen. There was consideration around that. It's not impossible that...
Well, that contract has a break clause, right, in January at Galatasaray if the right team comes in for him. Now, I don't know if Chelsea are on his list or not, but... There are a list of clubs that can get him out of that contract at Galatasaray. He scored an absolutely ridiculous goal at the weekend, by the way, Osimhen. It's one of the best bicycle kicks you'll ever see. It is truly sublime. And he seems like he's having a pretty good time there. Fair play to him. But I do wonder if there is that sense of being like, I want to play, Champions League football and be challenging at the sharp end of the Champions League even this season. Obviously, that's not Chelsea. Where is it? And what happens there, I think, is a completely different story. And we could talk about that for a whole episode probably. But It is interesting to see what happens with Osimhen in January and if one of those teams on his list does come in for him and try and get him out of Galatasaray.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you're talking about a figure of around £65 million, something like that, if you were to go and get Osimhen. So, yeah, definitely one to continue to look out for. We know that Chelsea love to spend money. They won't be able to resist it. And let's be honest, eventually they're going to go and do it on a serious number 9.
Yeah, I think probably, unless we see, a spurt of goals from here until January, which I wouldn't rule out for Nicholas Jackson. I really wouldn't. I think that we're starting to see the best of him. I kind of really do hope Chelsea keep the faith, but we will see. We will see. And that brings us to the end of this episode, Dean. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you very much for putting together that list of transfer dilemmas. I very much enjoyed walking through them.
Very good. Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Ranks FC. Thank you so much for listening as ever. We'll be back later in the week with a Champions League takeaway, looking at all of the action across Tuesday and Wednesday night. That'll be out late on Wednesday if you are in Europe and a little bit earlier if you are in the US. But from us, thank you for listening. We'll see you very shortly, gang. Take it easy. Peace.
Your dining room is the heart of your home, where meals are shared and memories are made. At Ashley, you'll find affordable dining furniture in a range of classic and modern styles. Ashley small space sets and extendable tables are designed to fit beautifully into any space, from cozy breakfast nooks and kitchens to formal dining areas fit for a feast. And with mix and match seating options, everyone at your table gets the perfect seat. At Ashley, style is served. Shop in-store or online today.